Back on DayZ, we're on the PlayStation 4 version of the game on the base console. We're taking a look at the game at this current point in time as of the most recent update, which is 1.08. So if you're not familiar with DayZ, this is an open world zombie survival game where the main threat isn't necessarily the zombies, but it is the other players that you encounter in these up to 60 player servers that can actually be increased in size if you do happen to get yourself a private custom server, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth later on. So with the latest version of the game, I decided to do an updated review of the package at the current point, which is just kind of what I do when these updates come out. And with Sony having thrown me some PS Plus for the year, I figured, hey, I might as well jump on DayZ and showcase it a little bit on this console. Because, you know what, it's neat seeing kind of how the development works on different platforms. It's the same game, but it definitely does run, a little bit differently in terms of the style. So my big issue with DayZ PS4, especially back in the day, was the performance of the game. It really was quite rough around launch. And honestly, it's a little bit better. It's definitely running a little bit better than it was at that point, which is good. Now, with this recent update, they did change a number of things with the game. They added a few mechanics such as the stoves, the whole fire system. There's frying pans now, a lighter, you get a new gun. It wasn't a huge update. I'll be honest with you. It wasn't a massive update. But it was one that added a few neat quality of life features, new cooking options, obviously, like I just mentioned. And it went out with a lot of bug fixes. Now, there's still numerous bugs and stuff like that, and it's still got its little performance hiccups. And the PS4 base version doesn't run quite as well as I would like it to. I mean, that's just kind of the state of these games. So with that, we're going to jump into what DayZ is, especially with this PlayStation 4 version of the game, which came out a bit later after the Xbox version because, the Xbox version, they did the game preview testing. So that's actually good because you got a full, kind of version of DayZ at that point. So in the game, you're basically moving around trying to loot resources within the world, weapons, tools, supplies, food. It is a survival game, so as you can see in the bottom corner there, we actually do have to watch our food, or like our hunger meters, our thirst meters too. And we also have to watch out for our health, such as like blood and also just general health bar too, because that can go down. If you're low on blood, you might actually find that your character is getting knocked out. You may have problems, and it runs off a volumetric system. So that means if you eat something like rice, it'll actually expand in your stomach, so you don't necessarily need to eat all of the rice, just as an example. And that leads into the technical aspects of the game. It's a very technical game in regards to what you can do with it. There's crafting, there's cooking, there's farming, and we're going to talk about all the little details. Also, base building's a big one, and that was also something that they sort of addressed with this recent update because people like the base building, and they've been trying to find a good balance for what the base building can provide for players. So when you join in, you get to pick from a various selection of regular servers. They do have a good meter in regards to curbing the I guess you could say loop hopping, server hopping, and stuff like that. I personally find it's a little aggressive just in regards to making it a little bit harder for newer players to get into the game, because if you leave one server because it like shuts down or it closes or any other number of problems, you'll basically spawn in absolutely the middle of nowhere, which can be a huge problem, and you're basically going to die. And as with the last update, I still feel that the food mechanic needs to be looked at more because it's still really detrimental, and it's very hard to get places because your food is draining at an accelerated rate, in my opinion. Same with the sickness, I feel, because you can get sick in this game. You get hypothermia, you almost constantly get cholera based on drinking any kind of water in the game. I think it's a little excessive, and again, it kind of turns players off a little bit, in my opinion. And the goal should be for growth as opposed to anything like that. So with it, you do obviously need to eat. There's a few different places you can find food. Greenhouses used to be really, really good for food. I've noticed not as much with this update. Zombies also less food on them. So they basically kept how hard it is to get food, and they made it a little bit harder to get food on top of that. So it's a neat game. Again, having to deal with the zombies, which are fairly aggressive in regards to how they hunt you down and how long they follow you. You've seen a big performance drop there that would get you killed. But yeah, you kind of have to deal with the zombies or move away from them, trap them in places. It's a neat system. And then you have to deal with other players. It's like, well, are they going to be hostile players? Are they going to be helpful players? You never know, right? Most of the time it's hostile, I'll be honest with you. That's just what the game is. So this is pretty big. This is a 230 kilometer square map. It's absolutely massive. And there's a lot of landmarks and things, different little towns you can find, vast fields, some mountainous areas, a lot of different landmarks. You can find things such as like castles. Yeah, this is just like really quite like compared to what I'm used to. But yeah, there's just like a lot of different areas that you can visit, different things. Again, cool castles, distinct buildings. They just added like a ski lodge and like a biathlon type area. But, you know, just like neat little things. Recently, amusement parks were added too. And they just keep continuously doing these, you know, quality of life upgrades to the game, adding new features, expanding concepts of the game, new content, occasionally like a new weapon or something like that. That's the gist of what we get with DayZ. And if that's not enough, they do have a DLC pack, a singular DLC offering, which is called Livonia. It's basically the same thing, but it's a more lush environment that you can visit. So it's mainly for the more experienced players where it's like, I need somewhere new to go. That's Livonia. I do have a separate review that kind of goes over the map. So we're going to focus mainly on what the core game is this time around. But yeah, it is a quite large landmass. You'll find neat locations such as, you know, like an airfield or something like that, which is where the conflict is. And that leads me into the custom, aka modded and or private servers. So these are things that are run by the community. You pay for them. You can pay for it yourself too if you want your own. And then people kind of modify them to the degree that you can. And with that, you'll get things such as like airfield spawning, different, you know, placements for buildings and stuff, more aggressive, like a PvP type of game. So that's a little bit more accessible if you just want to get in and have some conflict. Again, totally run off whether or not the community is running it, and they are fairly expensive. So that's a neat aspect. That's a little bit of a side thing within the game. So we're going to continue talking about the mechanics. So there's things like farming, you know, where you can actually do a little bit of horticulture. You can actually plant crops and grow them, and I think that's kind of neat. You have to get the supplies for it. Then, of course, as we mentioned, there's base building. So you can actually build a base if you'd like to. How did you get in here? How did that zombie get in here? So there's actually base building if you do want to create your own bases and kind of run them however you want, you know, putting in like chests. You can bury things in the ground, which is kind of cool if you need to stash things and stuff like that. So it does have neat mechanics in that regard. And then we could go further with that too in regards to other crafting materials. Like you could take like this bush here and you could like break it down, you could collect resources from it, and you can craft all sorts of neat things and different tools. And then that leads into the whole cooking system, where you could like put food on a stick because you don't want to get sick and you need to actually cook your food. So that's kind of just like neat aspects of the experience. I got a cool little cowboy going here. There is light elements of character customization too now. You can kind of change what you look like through some pre-select models. And also you can adjust like basically the clothing your character has. Not too in-depth, but I mean, it's an option, right? So a little bit of character customization that's present with it. And as you've been seeing, you know, performance isn't necessarily perfect. There's definitely bugs and stuff present within the game. That's kind of the gist of what this one is. I think there's actually like an airfield not too far out, but we're going to move towards where other structures are to kind of take a look at those too. But there's a lot going on in the game. There's a lot of different things to do, lots of different food types. I do think it's pretty decent in terms of the visuals and the sense of scale you get here, even on these versions. The base PS4 here, it's still pretty good for the offering of the world you get to kind of see. It's dynamic. You see some weather occasionally, like rain, or a more aggressive wind. And you have to deal with that because you get hypothermia. There's lots of different buildings you can go to. It's just a little bit rougher around the edges. It's still a pretty good comparable version of providing the whole DayZ authentic style. I guess I should also mention you can like drive cars, which are kind of a pain and really glitchy. But I mean, there's something, you know, extra that you can do in it. Combat's kind of neat. I don't really have like a good melee weapon, so I could just kind of take this guy on here. Lots of different clothing that you can deal with. There are lots of like, I guess you could say inventory and desync issues too within this one. But, you know, a wide range kind of like options for viewing. So you could see here, I could go into the first person. There's like a hardcore mode too, where it's a little bit more of a strict first person setup, and that's a server option that you can join into if you do want to. The parry's damage from hitting the guy with it, that's so crushingly disappointing because I needed to eat that. But yeah, there's just quite a lot to DayZ. I mean, there's so many little technical things. There are occasionally animals you'll run into. Not very often, though. They're not common things to see within the game. Not really a lot of swimming because it's a very landlocked level, but over there you could see that's like the prison island. That's like the one area that you could kind of venture off into, but it's very hard to make it over there, and it's really not that worth it. But it's a cool landmark. It's something a little bit different. And I'm just trying to really cover the basics of like what this game has to it, the different styles of play, and what you can do within it. Furthering on those technical aspects, you know, you kind of move around like this, and you'll notice there is that aspect of sound in the bottom left corner. The more I move, the more sound I make, and the more sound attracts different zombies to come and attack you. Zombies are fairly relentless. They will follow you for a very, very long time because they want you to die really, really badly. And if you're getting things, always feeding back into that technical aspect, if you're getting things such as bullets, you actually have to get the individual magazines here. You have to load them with bullets, and then you have to actually put them into the gun. So it's got that little extra little bump of technical dealership in regards to inventory management, character management, and dealing with, you know, supplies. There's the in-game sort of chat option too, where you can communicate with other people because they can cause problems, and that's a lot of what this is. It's a bit of a social experiment to a degree, I suppose you could say. How are you going to interact with others? How are they going to interact with you? And what are you going to do in this big world, you know? Are you going to try to survive to like reach certain points? Are you just going to attack other players? Are you going to explore and see what it has to offer? Are you going to be crafting? Are you going to try to, like, you know, get a farm going? Or are you going to live a simple life and make a base out in the middle of nowhere? Or are you going to explore? You're going to run the coastline? You could make your own little different, like, group and everything, too, if you want to be your own little weird society. You could start, like, I guess, a cult system or something if you wanted to. It's just kind of expansive in the sense of freedom. And I should have maybe mentioned this towards the start. But it's a very open game. There's no lore, there's no story, there's no focus, there's no missions. It's an open-ended game where you really can just go out and do whatever you want, whenever you want, for as long as you want. Until you die, and then you deal with the permadeath, and you don't get your stuff back unless you run and try to get it. But yeah, that's really what the game is. You're never sure what's going to happen. It could be the weirdest moment at any time. It's always a mix-up. It's always a mixed bag, because it's like, one minute everything will be going well. The next minute, you might have gotten sniped across the map. I actually had that in the stream the other night. I was just walking along a path. I had all these resources, and somebody just clipped me with a sniper shot, and I was instantly dead. That's how the game is. You never know what's going to happen. And it's a huge world, but there's still, you gotta remember, it's like 60 players are just running around doing their own thing. and you never know what they're thinking you're thinking, or what could possibly happen as you interact with the game. I guess I should also mention day-night cycles. Kind of briefly went over a little bit. There's animals roaming around, and it's hard to get all the little spots of the game because there's so many little tiny details that I know of from playing this game for a number of years quite fairly consistently. And it is neat that, you know, some people might make this like seem really action-packed, but the game really isn't. It's sort of a slower-paced adventure through an open field area. There's lots of trees and mountains, but you get the gist of what I'm saying. It's just you're walking around, enjoying nature, maybe getting a tent, going from town to town looking for resources, and just trying to live another day, keep on thriving, keep on surviving. I'd say that they've done a decent job on getting this running better. It's a far better state than it was when I first checked out the game on this platform, and it's nice to be back on here again, seeing this perspective, because I do think it's neat from a certain like point of view, seeing how games run on different platforms, because while it's the same experience, you know, there's different power involved, different setups, a different kind of multiplayer experience, right? But yeah, it's definitely in a good state. And I'd say DayZ, and I say this every time, is basically at the best level it's going to be. Don't expect more than what you think you're going to get with this game, because you got to keep your expectations low and got to just accept that with every update, as much as they want to, they do end up breaking a lot of things, causing new bugs while fixing some older ones. That's just the gist of the experience. See this huge map, and we're just down here, and we just came from over there. But you can see there's so many areas like the airfield, and then the new ski lodge, and all these little towns and harbor spots, and people can spawn anywhere. And you never know what's... Well, they can't spawn anywhere. They spawn largely along the beach side. But you get the gist of what I'm saying, is you're never quite sure what's going to happen, where you're going to go, and what you're going to have to deal with along the way. That's the fun of the game. It does have some neat mechanics for kind of managing your inventory, the hotkeys, but you can also have to deal with like the desync issues like I mentioned, and aside from performance, also some inventory bugs. But I think that covers DayZ on the PlayStation 4, the base console. Just showing it off, giving an updated thought on it, letting you see, you know, how the game's running, everything like that on the platform. I think it's something a little bit different to kind of showcase. I do like what they've done with this recent update. It's not a massive change, but it does add, you know, a neat little new feature here or there. It revamps the fire mechanics, you know, starting fires, dealing with stuff like that. And I do also want to, again, give a shout out, I don't know if I did in this video, to the more recent mechanic where you're able to, like, vault over things and ledges and climb over stuff. To me, that was, like, a huge change in the game, to be able to, like, have that extra level of movability within it. I think that's kind of really cool. And well done in regards to just easily kind of making it a little bit nicer to move through, so that you're not always just stuck in one spot. So I actually think there is a military, like an airfield around here, but we're not going to get to that point. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this look at DayZ and PS4, and then I covered most of the basics as to what this experience is like and what it does actually provide on the console platform, and just to see how it's running, which is okay. It's definitely not the best performance, and it, you know, hiccups at times which aren't good, but it's kind of just what is expected on here.